Hello, it's great to be here today at the Evidence-Based Research Conference to talk about our work on decision-making approaches to grant funding allocation. My name is Alejandra Recio, and I am part of the Research on Research team based at the Wessex Institute and the National Institute for Health Research. This work was conducted with my colleagues Xenia Kurbatskaya, Katie Meadmore, Catherine Fackrell, Amanda Blatch-Jones, and Simon Fraser. In this presentation, we will cover some of what we already know of peer review, why we conducted this realist synthesis, some of our findings, and a few take-home messages. So we started our journey by identifying those aspects of peer review that we know. So we know that peer review is an established mechanism used by most funding organizations to identify and support that the best research is conducted. It is fundamental to science as it ensures accountability for investment of public or private funds, and that the benefits of research are realized. However, if peer review is not monitored and kept current, it can become inefficient, create burden for all stakeholders involved in, and may slow innovation. We also know that most studies on peer review examine one particular funder in one context, and there is opportunity to learn about peer review across funders and contexts. So why are we worried about peer review? I'll illustrate this with some quotes. There is universal acknowledgement that the burden to write and/or read grant proposals has become excessive. Considering that most researchers additionally review journal manuscripts, we are in danger of totally preoccupying our most productive people with administrative, fundraising, and review activities. And this quote comes from an article published in 1983. Now, we fast forward more than 30 years, and we still find articles preoccupied by our understanding and the issues with peer review. It would seem that we still don't know what would have happened under a new system, or how we haven't ruled out improvement if we change the system. We need evidence on interventions that enhance peer review processes and reduce burden in specific research contexts, and find if these interventions can be realistically adapted across funders and research disciplines. To answer these questions, we conducted a realist synthesis. We adopted this approach because realist synthesis provides an explanatory analysis of what interventions work, for whom, and how, bringing fragmented evidence together. Realist synthesis takes into consideration the contexts in which the interventions operate, identifying how this may influence the successful implementation of such interventions. We identified what interventions have improved or enhanced peer review, for whom, this is in what contexts, and how through the outcomes of the interventions. A realist synthesis is guided by a program theory statement, which is used to analyze the evidence in itself. For us, this statement read, if variations to the typical peer review process to allocate research funds are introduced, then bias, burden, cost, or other could be reduced. Through this statement, we uncovered the interventions that have been developed to address issues of bias and burden associated with peer review. So what did we find? The search strategy produced 1,860 records of studies and reports, or narrative literature, including commentaries, analysis, editorial letters, and blogs. They have been published in both peer-reviewed journals and grey literature, and have been investigated or have discussed interventions to peer review used to allocate research funds, which means that we excluded all the evidence that was peer review for publication in journals. 111 sources were screened in full, and finally 95 included in the synthesis. We were able to link 65 configurations of context, mechanisms, and outcomes. And through the iterative process of the synthesis, additional searches identified 36 records or recent or ongoing funder interventions in peer review. About the sample of studies that we've identified and included, 50% of them were original studies, and the other half comprised reviews, magazine articles, reports, commentaries, editorials. Now, realist synthesis accepts this type of evidence as long as it is possible to extract an outcome or a mechanism from them. 1/3 of the evidence collected includes observationals and pilot studies, and only 1% of the sample are prospective studies of innovations in peer review, which tells us that maybe there is opportunity to design different types of studies like RCTs to explore issues with peer review. 11 categories of drivers triggering innovation in peer review were identified, and those included those to ensure research delivers scientific, economic, and societal benefit, promotes research career stability, promote funding of innovative research, or improve the selection, diversity, and accountability of reviewers. The issues that trigger most innovations in peer review were those that tried to minimize the burden of peer review and decision-making for everybody, applicants, reviewers, and funders. Back to the questions that realist synthesis answer in terms of what works, in our case, what interventions in peer review work. The evidence was mapped into 11 contexts defined by those drivers or triggers for implementing changes, and the context was created or triggered a response that was categorized into 33 categories of interventions. And this included or varied from shortening applications, increasing participation of public in research processes, or creating funding streams to support early career researchers. All of these then were classified as incremental changes or organization-level changes. A separate category of alternative approaches encompasses those interventions that look at mechanisms like using partial random allocation for funding decisions, sandpits, or e-Delphis to support the allocation of research funds. Recent or ongoing interventions from funders were focused on supporting early career researchers and established collaborations between funders to address funding demand. The outcomes of the interventions were also categorized as those that have an effect on processes, like what happens as a result of changing the size of an application, those that have an effect on people, like what happens when you provide training to applicants or reviewers, and those that have an effect on the organization, like what happens when a new funding stream to support innovative research is created. We found that interventions in peer review brought about change, but interventions with most evidence were those aimed at improving the way in which reviewers are identified and managed, or this is how peer reviewers are invited and assigned applications, and their feedback processed. Those interventions aimed at simplifying the application process, like adding or removing stages in the process, or those that have an expression of interest stage. Innovations with the least evidence were those that offer almost alternative approaches to peer review, such as using e-Delphi to make decisions, or lotteries, random allocation to allocate research funds. Our findings provide a large number of takeaway messages, but I would like to highlight 3 of them. The synthesis allowed us to move beyond summarization of existing evidence to provide fresh thinking regarding the opportunities available to enhance current practices for funding decision-making. Also, we found that there is no evidence of interventions that can replace peer review. However, there is evidence of interventions that complement and strengthen the process, which can be incorporated into funding schemes and be continuously evaluated to ensure they remain current. A complete replacement of peer review is not a realistic approach to enhancing decision in funding. Thank you very much for watching.